Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Lumen Podcast. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming an extraordinary guest. This is Ryan Stramrood. Ryan is a performance and inspirational speaker and an ultra extreme open water and ice swimming adventurer. And also, he is a holder of, get this, three Guinness World Records from Antarctica to the Arctic Circle, from the Bering Sea to shark infested waters in South Africa. Ryan has pushed the limits of his body and his mind in ways most of us would consider impossible. But beyond the swims and records, Ryan is a master storyteller who translates his experiences into lessons on resilience, mindset, and pushing past our impossibles. His message: performance equals potential minus interference. Today, we'll dive into how he unlocked this formula, how it applies to both life and business, and what it takes to face fear and do it anyway. Welcome, my dear Ryan.
Yeah, so marvelous to be here. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Of course, my friend, I was remembering where we met. We met at an academy, an EO
Yeah.
event for leadership in Puerto Rico.
I remember it so well. I loved it, the meeting everyone and of course being on that stage. And then I spent an extra week in Puerto Rico and that was fantastic.
Nice. So, my friend, let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about how was Ryan growing up? How was childhood like?
Ryan growing up and Ryan still is what I like to term as a complete average Joe. And it's very important that I start like that. So no matter what the listeners and the audience here today, there is nothing special about me. I have no clever ability to do anything like self-heat my center core and survive some of the situations that you're going to hear about any better than anybody else could. I'm an average Joe. I'm a single dad. I run an advertising business, believe it or not, on the sales side. And more recently in life, thanks to some of the boundaries I've ended up pushing in some of the craziest places on this planet, it sent me on this journey to start telling the story, and I've unlocked certain things in the human mind that you can't learn in a classroom or a university or a college, and that's helped me stand on stages. And the next chapter of my life, the last 12 years, I've been going around the world, spreading my messages and absolutely loving it.
That's awesome. That is interesting how you describe yourself as an ordinary father and businessman who went from couch potato in your 30s to holding three
Yeah.
world records. How did that transformation begin?
It happened, I was at the age of 29. I was still a couch potato. I had done absolutely nothing sporty in my life. I was an active, kind of active guy, not total useless, but I'd never achieved anything nor ever thought of myself in the sporting realm at all. I was doing well in business, and I turned 30 and I was starting to get a little bit fat and lazy and starting to get a bit irritated with myself. And I took a client away on an incentive trip, one of my advertising clients, and I was sitting on the patio having a beer with him at my house on a little farm that I've got, and I started to tell him how unhappy I am with myself, that I'm putting on the pounds and the kilograms. And he said to me, "But Ryan, I joined a little swimming squad. Why don't you come on Monday morning and have a swim with us and get active?" And it was one of those occasions where, he's a client. So, of course, I nodded my head and said yes. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. And until, of course, Monday morning came and I woke up realizing I'd promised my client that I'm going to be there. And thankfully, he was a good client. So I felt the need to get out of bed early and go and do that swimming squad. Um, and off I went. And I don't know if anyone knows how it works at a swimming squad. You arrive at the pool and there are different lanes. And the lanes are usually divided into the slow lane right on the one side and then the slightly faster all the way up to the other side of the pool to the very fast. And you arrive and the coach doesn't know you and you introduce yourself. And then you have to kind of, he says, "Well, I don't know you, but put yourself where you need to be." And of course, I went and put myself in the fast lane, thinking that would, just watching them, they didn't look that fast. I jumped in and I managed about 20 lengths. That's half a kilometer. And I could feel that I was in deep, deep trouble because the first four lengths feel easy. You slot in and off you go, you're bulletproof. And then all of a sudden it hits you what you've just done. But now you've got people behind you, so you've got to really push and you don't want to look like a total idiot. Anyway, I ended up looking like a total idiot. I had to get out of the pool and have a little vomit behind a tree over there because I'd worked myself so hard. And the first time in my life, which was a transition point for me to answer your question, was that the next morning I got back up and I went there again. Instead of just going, no, that is not for me, I went back and I did it again, a little more maturely. I shifted down a few lanes and then I went back again and I went back again. And while I was doing this process, in the swimming pool, in one of the lanes that I was in, was a guy who had swum from Robben Island, which is here in Cape Town, South Africa, in my backyard. That's where Nelson Mandela spent, I think it's 19 of his 27 years incarcerated. And it's a very difficult swim to swim from that island all the way to the beach. Water is really cold. It's about 7.5 kilometers, about 4.5 miles. And there was somebody in my lane who had done that swim in a Speedo, goggles, and cap. And I remember just being so starstruck because when people did that here in South Africa, in Cape Town, years ago, that made it into the newspapers, that stuff you read about. And I used to read about these wonderful, inspiring people who do these crazy swims in that cold water, shark-infested water. How do they do it? Couldn't understand it. So when I found out I was in the same lane as someone who had actually done that I'd marveled over all my life, I was really starstruck. And eventually that guy said, well, Ryan, hang on, why don't you set that as a goal for yourself? And that was like a real epiphany for me because I was fairly useless in sport. And that's was something that I had attributed to people that you pedestal, people better than me, people that, things that I can't do. I've always wanted to be able to do that kind of thing, but you don't even go there in your head. And cutting a long story short, obviously I said no, but eventually I set it as a goal. And a couple of months later, I found myself out there jumping into that cold, scary, dark, deep blue water and swimming all the way across in the cold. And I walked out on what's known as Bloberg Beach about 2 hours and 30 minutes later. And I found my feet for the first time. When just so your listeners know, when you do these swims, we do it in purest form. So there's no wetsuit, there's no help that you get. Once you walk into the water from the start of the swim, you may not touch anything that helps you until you walk out. So you can't hold onto the boat on the side. You can't take a float or anything that helps you. You're allowed to, they throw you your feed and you drink just to get the carbs and that you have to do. But you get no help. And the first swim I ever did, 2.5 hours of not touching anything and not being able to put my feet down. When I finally got into that shallow water and I put my feet down and I walked out onto that beach, I firstly had a proper shiver because it was really cold. But it changed something in my head just on how I looked at myself. And all these years that I've pedestaled people who have just done something that I just done. And I was so nervous for it. When you're so prepared and you're so nervous, it actually isn't that hard. And that just triggered something in my brain to say, I need to explore a little bit more as to what Ryan Stramrood is capable of. And that started quite an incredible journey.
Wow. How much is 4.5 miles? It's like 10K,
No,
12K,
about 7.5 kilometers.
and a
So it's
half.
not massive.
Nice.
But the challenge of that swim is not the distance. It's a big distance, but the challenge is the cold. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about how the cold impacts.
And the current as well, right?
Yeah, the currents and there are things that sting you, and there's things that mess with your mind,
Of
and there's a
course.
lot of wind, which makes the water choppy. So there's a lot that goes into it. But if you want to just talk a little bit about the cold water, should I go there?
Oh, yes, please do.
Let's. So again, I'm an ultra extreme open water and ice water swimmer. So what a lot of people don't realize, because lots of people say to me, "Oh, why don't you just wear a wetsuit, when you do these crazy long cold swims?" And the point of what I'm doing is the cold, because to perform for just using Robben Island 7.5 kilometers for 2 hours swimming is very difficult. But that's actually the easy part. You can train yourself to get that distance. You can prepare your body, but the hard part is doing that with the element of cold as it seeps into the human core, because us humans have not evolved well to handle the cold. We've evolved very well to get out. So when we throw ourselves into cold, the body and the mind most specifically goes into overdrive, and it implements this pain, panic, and fear, and they come together in the split second to accentuate self-doubt, and you deny the ability of rational thought. You can't think of anything else, anything other than getting out of that cold environment and into the little support boat. And if you can override that initial panic that's happening in your head, you'll feel a bit better for a while, but eventually that cold starts to seep into your core. And that sends a whole different level of panic, and your muscles start shutting down because all the blood has left your extremities to sit in your center core and keep your heart beating so that it can still pump blood to the brain. You can live without arms and legs. So after many, many years of evolution, the body kind of knows this. So first, if your mind can't get you out, and the body implements all its defense mechanisms. And that is the blood rushing to your center core. And there's less blood in your arms and your muscles and your thighs. You've got less control and less power in those muscles. So it slows you down, and that keeps you in the water longer. So it becomes a spiraling effect. So swimming in extremely cold water is very difficult and it's very deadly. But you can train for it. And this has been the base and the platform of all the teachings that I do around the world. Because once you understand what's happening in your head, why it's happening, and once you understand that it doesn't just happen when you jump in freezing cold water, it happens every time you walk into your office, every time you're sitting in a meeting, every time you get a difficult target, or any time there's any kind of uncomfortable environment in your life. It might not be as profound, but the same processes are happening. And that's where I try to open a lot of people's eyes so they can see it, because when you understand it, you can then deal with it.
I love that. Ice water is a powerful metaphor in your talks. What did the cold teach you about the mind's default settings and survival instincts?
Yeah, so I always say that the default setting of the mind, I call it self-protect. It's designed to keep you safe. It's designed, and it has evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to ensure that we all stay inside our comfort zone. Now, everyone who's listening has been told, get outside your comfort zone or don't stay in your comfort zone. We've all heard that word to death. So it's just become like another word in our lives. But I do things very differently. I try to make you understand what's actually happening in that comfort zone. It's exceptionally difficult to get outside your comfort zone. It really is, because most of the time, 99% of the time, we don't even know we're in that comfort zone, because we've got this powerhouse of a mind of ours that keeps us nice and cool, calm, and collected, makes us believe that we're giving our best, makes us believe that we're performing at our peak. And we don't even realize that we can challenge that. And that's what I've learned in the element of cold. It's been something quite profound, and it has opened my eyes firstly, and now eyes around the world, as to what is actually happening in our minds when this is all happening, when it's all going down. It makes perfect sense. You mentioned in your introduction that I work to, it's Tim Gallwey's equation, which is your performance is equal to your potential minus interference. Now, it's just a very simple little equation, but we all want to perform. Every business meeting, every corporate have performance meetings. They want their employees to perform. You want to perform as an individual, be it in sport or be it in your workplace or just be it in life in general. And we all have a set level of potential, which you can grow and you can nurture, but that potential is detracted from interference. Now, interference comes in a million different forms, and every human on earth, including me, has got interference in nearly every element of our lives. And there's some common interferences, just like, if we're talking in the workspace, like a boss who doesn't kind of give you the space to do what you need to do, or not a nice working environment, or whatever the case may be. But the interference that I talk about is the interference that lives in everybody's head. And that is something that I unpack a lot. And I use a term called an excuse magnet. Stop me if I'm going on too. I get
No,
very
no,
passionate
please
about this. So
go ahead.
just shut me up if I go on too long. But I talk about excuse magnetism. You'll probably remember it from the keynote you attended. And that is that when we are uncomfortable, when us humans are subjected to uncomfortable environment, particularly in an uncomfortable environment where there's a little bit of fear involved, where we don't know the outcome of it. We don't know what's going to happen. There's potential failure that could happen if we do that. Now, this powerhouse of a mind that we all have, this gateway to absolute greatness, is absolutely a gateway to absolute greatness, but its default setting is to hold us back. Its default setting is to not send us forward into that uncomfortable space where we might fail and to explore it. Its default setting is to send us running in the opposite direction. Okay.
Survival, right?
And the reason, say again?
It's survival. Like it wants us to keep
Survival.
alive, right?
100%. So this unbelievably powerful human mind of ours that is wants to keep us safe and in our comfort zone where we will deliver. And this is very important. In your comfort zone in the modern world, you will still deliver. You will still get by. You will still put food on the table. There's a roof over your head. You're hitting your number at work. Your boss is happy. You operate well in a comfort zone because that's where you're comfortable and that's where you thrive. But that is also where you're not growing 100%. If you don't get outside that comfort zone, you can't learn new stuff. And when you stop learning new stuff, you cannot grow. And when you stop growing, you get overtaken by those who are. It is as simple as that. And we don't realize this because of this evolution of mind that's keeping us safe in our comfort zone, which is all good. So we don't do something really stupid as human beings, back in the caveman days. But the side effect of this evolution is that this very powerful brain of ours that's defaulted to the self-protect mode is also keeping us safe from the emotional pain that comes from failure. Because when we fail, there's consequence, there's embarrassment, there's humiliation, there's whatever that comes with that. And none of us want that. And quite often we don't even see the situation and think those things through rationally and logically. We just become excuse magnets and we find excuses why not to make that decision or go that direction. It is
I
as simple
relate.
as that. And I tell a wonderful story about my English Channel. I'm not sure you remember it, where I was 9 hours into my English Channel swim. I was trying to swim from Dover in the UK all the way across to France. It's 40 kilometers, which is about 25 miles. As the crow flies, it's a little shorter, but you don't swim straight, unfortunately. So I was swimming about 40 kilometers on the day. And I got the weather call really wrong. I was a little bit backed into a corner, and you kind of hope that you're going to get flat water. But within a few hours, 3 hours of my swim, the wind came up and the waves were rolling me around. And it started to get dark, and I was freezing cold in that 16-degree water. I was chafed. I hope you understand that word, chafed with the salt water. I'd been stung by jellyfish, and 9 hours of swimming in those rough waves that were rolling me around. I hit the wall, totally hit the wall. I couldn't take one more stroke. So, when you hit the wall, a lot of your listeners will know that when you hit the wall and you're in a running race or a cycle race or anything endurance wise, that generally means it's the end of your challenge, right? The tank is empty. When you hit the wall, and that's devastating, by the way, but when you hit the wall and you are 9 hours into an English Channel swim, where the wind has been rolling you around, so it's 10 times harder to take each stroke. You are rolled on this one side to another, so you've got to stabilize. It is pitch dark. You can't see anything anymore. You are freezing cold. You still have at least 4.5 to 5 hours of swimming ahead in that dark if you're going to get anywhere close to the French coast. And if you put one hand on the support boat alongside you, you are instantly disqualified. Now, hitting the wall in that moment is very, very difficult and quite traumatic. And 99.9% of people will pull out there, and I very nearly did. But thankfully, I didn't in that day. And but if I did, what would have happened? I was trying to give the example of the excuse magnetism. If I did, what would have happened? I would have climbed out onto that boat. Everyone would have patted me on the back and gone like, "Wow, Ryan, that's incredible. You swam for 9 hours in those terrible conditions. That's not what we planned for you. That's not what the environment was meant to look like. That's not what the weather chart said. You gave your best. You persevered for 9 hours. Well done. You got really unlucky." And I would have been the excuse magnet. I would have sucked it all in and gone, "Yep, how unlucky did I get? It wasn't me." It was the weather, it was the waves, it was the dark, it was the jellyfish, it was a million other things except me. Okay. And that is where I discovered this excuse magnetism. And somehow, somewhere in that English channel, I managed to flick that switch, that mode that I mentioned. I took myself out of the self protect mind that we all default to and put into what I call self explore. And that is just a different mindset. And I changed gear from body letting me down to mind, saying it's now time that the head takes over and it's no longer body is finished. And I swam another 4.5, just short of 5 hours to France, stroke by stroke, screaming and crying, no one cares. And I managed to make it. And that just changed a lot of my world back then when I did that swim, to have a look at, like, hang on, what happened there, Ryan? You found a place where you couldn't take one more stroke, where it was impossible. Yet how on earth did you swim another 4.5 hours in those same conditions? And that got me thinking when I was back, in the comfort of a hotel room, starting to lie there in my bed, wondering what had happened. And all these little epiphanies started to come to me. I started to find and realize how the mind was working. It's trying to keep me safe, which is all wonderful, but it's very, very overzealous. And that happens, I'm giving an extreme swimming example, but I hope everyone's drawing parallels in their own lives. It doesn't have to be as extreme as this. It's just when you're in a difficult situation, when you don't know what the outcome is, when it's a lot easier to quit or to not go there. And there is every excuse under the sun that nobody's going to go, oh, you silly, you weak, you lazy, you whatever. Everyone would have just patted me on the back and gone, we totally understand that decision.
Yeah,
And
I
that
relate.
is what,
I thank you for that. I love the idea of interference, and I love that concept. And it relates to many things. I remember I shared with you that I like open water swimming. I was lucky to have swam with my brother the crossing, or el cruce, that get called in Cancun, which is a 10K swim to Isla
okay.
Mujeres, to Women Island. There were no
Wow.
women there as promised, but we did cross it at the end. Uh, but it was really interesting because all the thing that goes in your mind, or at least in mine, I was imagining things like, oh my God, it's gonna be horrible because what about the sharks? What about the animals? What about the waves? What about the currents? I met a friend who goes there by boat, and he said, oh, there's a couple of kilometers there that are really harsh between that. Are you sure you're gonna swim it? And in the end, when I went that day and I said, just I'll do it. One thing that was incredible is that I could see the bottom, the sand. It was like, I don't know, 10 or 8 meters below me, and you could see the sand.
Wow.
You could even guide yourself through the ripples of sand, so that you knew if you were going that way or that way. I still got managed to get lost a little, and there were 1,500 other swimmers around me, so that made it a lot easier as well.
Yeah.
But coming back to the interference part, I am a fan of Stoicism, and I remember Seneca was told at one point, like, well, you have lived your whole life with Stoicism. Tell me something that you have learned. And he said, I have learned to be nicer with myself. And I'm curious if you have that interference as well and how you manage it, because on one side, we're not our brains. Our brain is an organ that we have in our body, and it's helpful in many ways, but it's not who we
Yeah.
are. And
Yeah.
sometimes people in business, people in life, people can be really harsh with themselves because of past experience where someone older could have said, "Oh, that stop doing stupid things." Oh, so I'm stupid, or things like that. How do you manage that
Yeah.
interference from your mind to yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, that those are all little interferences that build over the years, aren't they? I'm exactly the same, and I'm subjected to exactly the same, if not more than anyone else, especially when I started making a name in the extreme swimming world. There's this little group of sports extremists out there that, you become, and I was doing some crazy things and starting to push human boundaries. So there's a lot of spotlight on you, and that's an interference in itself. So you start to avoid, no, I can't do that. You find all the excuses not to do it just because you're so scared of failing. It's that fear of failure, and you've got to rationalize it. So there is, but I don't have a step one, two, or three of what you need to do to wipe out interference. We all got it. But step one, I've just said I won't give you, but generally speaking, step one is acknowledging that no matter what decision you're making, you are being interfered with somewhere along the line. Okay. And you need, if you're aware of that, of what that interference is, then you can start to unpack it. But that often takes a lot of introspection and review and vulnerability and what acknowledgement of of your situation. And maybe you're taking the decision that's going to give you the growth and moves you outside your comfort zone, and kudos to you. But yeah, interference is something that I work with a lot of people, just one-on-ones where we talk a lot about it and we unpack it. And I can't tell you what your interference is, but through conversation, without a doubt, it's going to come out.
For
Just
sure.
by, and you might not even know that it is coming out, but I will spot that there's that interference that's living. That's why you try to maneuver around it left, right, and center. And I will be able to hear, and once you start doing this, you'll be able to hear yourself. I hear my own excuses now. I totally hear my own excuses because I stand on stages and preach this, but someone will say to me, Ryan, why don't you try and do X, Y, and Z? And I'll immediately come up, no, I can't because I'm traveling all the time for speaking gigs and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Um, and then I'll drive home in my car and I'm like, you know what? Yes, there are a million barriers, but if you really wanted to do that thing, you could make the time and you can find how to do it and you can put the prep in. So rather decide, do you really want it or don't you want it? If you don't want it, and that's a genuine, and you're being honest with yourself, then why do it? I'm also, I want to caveat some of the stuff I've said. I don't preach always get outside your comfort zone with everything you do. Sometimes just lie on your couch and watch some Netflix and do stuff within your comfort zone. But don't let that be the default. Don't let that be what you do all the time. You need to grow as a human. We only got one life. And so many, like the vast majority of people cruise through life and they do okay. But wow, they just didn't know what was on the other side of that line, that their mind has worked so hard to make sure that they stay inside that zone, delivering their steady performance, but just not finding the kind of growth that they were really capable of. And it's beautiful to see when people actually see that and they try and they push themselves just a little bit past, which makes you vulnerable, which opens the door to failure. But what is failure? If it's you don't learn from failure, you learn from unpacking the feelings around that failure, the
Yeah.
review of that failure. Failure without, I do a beautiful keynote, by the way, and I should maybe I want to give away the punchline because I've been subjected to to failure big time, where I've tried something and it hasn't worked. And then I have not managed that failure well at all. And that mismanagement of the failure has caused me endless grief and endless underperformance and comfort zone living. And until the day I figured it out, and now I've made a whole keynote out of it, and it's opening a lot of people's eyes. But sorry, where I was going with that is we all know that failure is part and parcel to growth. Okay, we've all heard that before. And yes, of course, it's true. But what you don't hear very often, and what I preach really loudly, is that there are two kinds of failure. There's the failure that you sweep under the rug and you find all the excuses and you just push on and you don't learn. That is the bad kind of failure. That's the failure that's just going to repeat over and over and get you into big trouble. It's when you have a failure and you actually sit down and you review it and you acknowledge it and you get vulnerable with it and you open yourself up. You actually look for reasons why it actually might have been your fault, even if it wasn't. Look for those reasons, because it's hard to find. Very easy to find reasons why it wasn't you. A lot harder to find reasons why it was you, because you've got this powerhouse of a mind trying to guide you away from those reasons to self-protect you. But it's the failure that you learn from, the failure that you acknowledge, the failure that you become vulnerable with and introspective with. That's where the growth happens, and that's in my opinion, the good kind of failure.
I love that difference on failure because on one side, and I love during the podcast asking about people's failures. And I think that failure has a bad connotation, but it's a great stepping stone or a great moment of eureka, aha, of saying, "Oh my God, I get it now." I
Yeah,
failed, but then I learned and then I applied. But it can
yeah,
happen that you don't learn from your failure and that you don't feel anything from it and that you just sweep it
yeah,
on under the rug. So I like that difference a lot.
yeah.
Take us throughout the idea of the Guinness World Records. How did that start? and how has that journey been for you?
It's the Guinness World Records. You know what? I absolutely love my Guinness World Records, and it's a huge accolade and a pat on my back. And I talk about them, and they're all over my website, of course. But I must tell a story. Um, when I had two Guinness World Records, and then I did this big swim. And the way it happens is when you do something like this, you've got to apply to Guinness. It has to be ratified. You've got to fill out a bunch of forms. They've got to recognize it, and it takes time. And once you've done all of that, eventually, you wait for them to acknowledge it and say, yeah, we're going to ratify it. Well done. You've got another Guinness World Record, or you don't. And I'd done this big swim, and off it went to apply to Guinness. And a long time after, I got a email back saying, congrats, Ryan, we're going to ratify your third Guinness World Record. Well done. I'm super excited, obviously, and I go onto the website and have a look, and there's me coming out of the water in my Speedo in amongst all the other records. And I want to tell someone, but there's no one home. It's just me and my little 10-year-old son, Jesse. So I call him over. Hey, Jess, like, come have a look at this. And he always told us he's already irritated because now he's got to get up off the couch and put his screen down, right? But he wanders over to me. He's like, Dad, what did you do? So I say, oh, Dad, I did this big swim. He's like, oh, another swim. I'm like, yeah, but this is Dad got a Guinness World Record for this swim. So come look. So he comes and he stands behind me now. He's looking at the computer screen, and he's like, what? I said, no, Guinness World Record. He's like, what's a Guinness World Record? So I'm not, oh, you don't know what it is. So I'm trying to explain to him what a Guinness World Record is while he looks over my shoulder. And the more I explain what a Guinness World Record is and why maybe Dad's just a little bit cool, the less impressed he is. But all of a sudden, I just see his little face light up, and he goes, Dad, there's a guy who put 32 marshmallows in his mouth. Can you do that? So
That's
I love
awesome.
that story. I love that story because it really does contextualize it. My Guinness World Records are hard fought. Very proud of them. But we must be careful, getting too excited about Guinness World Records.
I understand.
Maybe I
And
can't.
kids are really
Yeah,
good to help us put our feet on the ground, huh?
yeah,
We're great
absolutely. It was
teachers.
wind your neck in, Dad. There's the marshmallow guy. Can you do
How
that?
many
And
marshmallows were you able to fit in? I bet you tried it.
not, I refuse to try.
Take us into one of your most dangerous swims. What did you feel in that moment, and what did you learn coming out of it?
So one of my most dangerous swims was when I was trying to push boundaries in Antarctica. Um, and myself and a couple of friends had been pushing our own personal boundaries quite a long way in terms of testing the cold. We haven't really spoken about that, but the element of cold, as I said, humans haven't evolved well to handle it. We've evolved very well to avoid it, and all those defense mechanisms that happen. And the element of cold in water is 25 times more deadly than in air. So if you've got 25 hours standing mostly naked in 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degree Fahrenheit air, you've got 1 hour in water, and that's the same temperature. Just it's a hypothetical example, but just to illustrate that the element of cold in water sucks the life out of a human being so quickly. And that is one of the reasons why the mind that is so powerful and geared to protect us reacts the way it does. And when you keep repeating the stuff that I do, you start to understand those processes because they're not happening subconsciously anymore. They're brought right to the front of your mind, and it gives you quite a nice window into what's happening upstairs. With that caveat, we had got to a point in our journey where we had pushed, let me talk for me, where I had pushed past, or I'd been pushing boundaries that I didn't think I could do. Finding different challenges that would be very difficult, and I knew I'd have to train really hard. I knew I'd have to do some proper mental work to get from A to B and to survive it. And now we wanted to go a little bit further and have a look, what is potentially meant to be humanly possible to endure in the element of cold. And we set a challenge to try be the first in the world to swim an official ice mile south of the Antarctic Circle. So that's what we ended up doing. And unfortunately, we missed the geographic goal because the ship we were on the weather was too bad when we were south of the circle. But the day later, just as we had crossed the line back into what's north of the circle, made no difference to the water temperature, by the way. It was just a geographical. We got to give it a go, and I swam 1 mile in my Speedo in water that is -1, which is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, -1 Celsius and 30. So it was actually below freezing level of water. Being salt water, it freezes a little bit lower. And that was definitely the most dangerous because we pushed limits way beyond what we should have. And I was in that water for 32 minutes. Yeah, I wasn't in a good state when I finished, but very proud. I managed to make it. I managed to keep my wits about me and my head in the game, and then survived the recovery, which is quite hard because I was very hypothermic and all the blood sitting in my core, and I was very only semi-conscious really. I was walking and awake, but not everything's happening very slowly. But all of that said, and it might sound a little bit cowboyish, but a lot of preparation went into that, and a lot of work went into having the right recovery facilities for when I got out. So it was a
Yeah.
very it was, if that wasn't there, I don't think we would have made it. You really needed you're helpless yourself, so you need someone to help bring you back to a core temperature. So that was probably the most dangerous swim that I've done in terms of pushing the limits. But the one that I've come closest to losing my life is actually the North Channel. I was trying to swim from Ireland across to Scotland, from Donaghadee to Port Patrick. And that's a 34-kilometer swim in cold water, not icy ice, but like 11 Celsius, which is about 51, 52 Fahrenheit. It's very cold water to be in for an extended period of time, and I would have been in for probably about 13 hours of solid swimming, similar to my English Channel. English Channel's about 5 degrees warmer. And in the middle of that swim, and this is a whole long story, which I won't go into all the detail, but 6.5 hours in, contracted something called SIPE, which is swimming-induced pulmonary edema. So all the different things that were happening to me, from the rough water to choking on the seawater to the jellyfish stings of the lion's mane jellyfish to lack of sleep to medication to a million different things, all came together and disrupted a chemical balance in my body. And unbeknown to me, because I'm out there and I'm trained to push past all the hardships, and I know I'm meant to feel terrible in the swim. So when I started feeling terrible, I just mentally knew I needed to push myself harder and not moan. You suppress all the nice comfort of allowing yourself to have a moan. I've got to keep positive thoughts. But anyway, what was happening inadvertently, I was drowning. My lungs were filling up with water, slowly but surely. And I was battling more and more to get breath. And I didn't know this because I thought it was the waves hitting me in the face and I couldn't breathe. But it suddenly snowballed, and I pretty much blanked out. I lost memory. I don't think I actually was unconscious, but from one moment I was swimming really badly, and the next moment I was in a support boat with the Coast Guard there with oxygen on my face and being rushed off to hospital. So those are some of the swims out of the many that I've done that have added a layer or many layers of interference into the next time I try and stand on a shore, because you lose a little bit of confidence in your ability. You're bulletproof. You have success after success after success. Then all of a sudden you don't do anything different, and you get kicked in the pants, something horrid. And that isn't that life, everything's cruising along, and then something happens, and it knocks our confidence. And what I've learned in the very, very accentuated sport of swimming, where when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. I've learnt the impact that has, and I've learnt what needs to be done to manage those failures or disappointments or setbacks. And if you don't, what the consequences are.
So fear is something that we all wrestle with. How do you distinguish between real danger and imagined fear?
Sure, that's actually an interesting question. Yeah, so I mean, fear is, I have plenty fear, but we've also all heard about resilience, right? Every business in the world wants, to talk about we need to be more resilient. We need to, that's such a buzzword. And what is resilience if you really unpack it? Resilience is merely the rationalization of fear. Okay, so when
Nice.
you rationalize fear, if you can rationalize fear, that makes you resilient because you understand, you unpack it, you take time and you work out your own mental processes on looking at that fear. Why am I fearful? What am I fearful of? Is it logical? Yes, it is. What can I do to make it less fearful? Is it illogical? Why am I then fearful of it? What's happened in my past? Now that sounds like a dream world. Who's going to do that in daily life when you're making decisions and you have a fear? But it makes a massive difference. It's everything. So how do you distinguish between an imaginary fear? I think all fear is imaginary, isn't it? All fear lives in our head, and some fears you need to heed. Some fears are illogical, and you need to rationalize them and overcome them. I talk a lot about, as an inspirational speaker, I'm not the inspirational speaker who stands on your stage and goes, anything you put your mind to is possible. Just put your mind to it and off you go. I'm a little bit more realistic and I like my audiences to really relate to me. So I present two lines. I present the mind's endpoint over here, and I present the real endpoint over here. Now, in my sport, let's just use my Antarctica example. There are only two outcomes in Antarctica that could possibly have happened when I was in that water. One, I warm the whole of Antarctica up to my body temperature. Two, Antarctica's waters cool me down to its temperature. What do you think is going to happen? Obviously. So there is no way you're going to keep swimming in that water forever. So there is an impossible. If we can just be realistic and accept that no matter how much I put my mind to wanting to swim for 5 days in Antarctica, not going to happen, right? However, where my mind tells me it's time to get out and you're absolutely mad and death is 5 seconds away, you cannot perform under this, you are petrified, stupid, whatever, is not where the real danger is. And it's these two lines that I dabble with in every aspect of my life. Now, I've given you extreme examples. I hope your listeners can use it, draw the parallels to something maybe that's less extreme than swimming in Antarctica. But the magic happens between those two lines. So if you turn around when you hit the line that your mind tells you, no, guys, or no, Ryan, or whoever you are, I can't do that. No, not sure what happens on the other side of the line. Yeah, probably a good idea to turn around. On the left of that line is underachievement. Okay, you'll get by. You put food on the table, as I went through earlier, but you're not going to grow. You're going to survive. If you go past the other line, and the big question is, where is that other line? That's what I'm still trying to push a little bit, and some of us keep doing. But if you go past it, you've got to be clever. You're going to die. It's not clever to do that. But playing in the middle, stepping over that mind's endpoint, that's a very uncomfortable space. It's the quintessential uncomfort zone, away from comfort zone. But that's where the growth happens, because that's where you open yourself up to failure. And what I tell people when we go through this process is, yes, there's a fear of failure. Maybe it's a rational fear, maybe it's not a rational fear. We first unpack that. But as you said earlier, if you fail and you process that failure well, the growth that comes from that failure gives you a whole new platform on which to stand when you set your next goal. It is absolutely uncanny how true that is. But the other thing that is exceptionally true is that, and I'm just making up percentages, I don't really know, but 95% of the people who try something they're convinced they're going to fail won't fail. And they'll go, oh, didn't know. Yeah, but what if I did fail? But so often, 95% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time for many, you don't fail. And again, now you've gone over that platform, you've dabbled in something, you've done something you never would have before. Do you think your mind is the same? There's my brilliant quote. I've got to think who said it. Oliver Wendell Holmes, that a mind expanded by a new experience can never go back to its original dimensions.
I
It's
love
not my
that.
quote. I'm sure you've heard it before. But once you've experienced something new, fail or succeed, you're not the same person anymore. You're better. You're on a slightly higher platform. Your horizon is slightly different. Your outlook on things is slightly different. And if you unpack, if it is a failure and it didn't go well, the growth, you could even get higher than the success. Success, so is there's actually so little to learn from success in comparison to failure. No one sets out to fail. Don't do that. That would be silly. But sometimes it happens. And if you are always having success, there are a couple of things are happening. You're not pioneering. You are setting goals within your comfort zone. So they might look big and scary to everyone else around you, but deep down, you kind of know you can hit that goal and you're not growing. That's success. That's what it looks like. Okay, now don't think I'm
Wow.
mad. I'm not knocking success.
No, of
But
course.
also, when you have success after success after success after success, other things are happening. And it's absolutely human. Little bits of natural complacency start setting in. Loss of discipline, little bit of expectation of success, little bit of laziness. That all happened to me, and it's a beautiful keynote that I do actually that shows how that happened to me after all my wonderful run of success, and then how I got kicked in the pants when all those little things came in. Do I need to do that last training session? And I always make it. I'm so fit. No. Do I need to do that last horrible freezing cold ice bath to condition my body and my mind? Oh, done this so often. No. Do I have to go to the doctor and get another stress ECG to make sure my body is right and my heart is pumping and everything's working fine? Did it 6 months ago, man. I'm fine. I feel fine. No. Those little things in my world, in the extreme world, that's those are the dangers. You got to stick to the basics. And there's nothing quite like failure that makes you go, oh, whoops. Let's stick to the basics, but now I know a whole lot more. Hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. I love the idea about managing your perceptions and your and what you know and how to differentiate between fears. I do follow you in social media. I think in Instagram you posted recently. How many times have you done the crossing to the island?
144 times now.
That must be a record.
It was a record. Unfortunately, I've been overtaken. Yeah, it's going to sound like an excuse, but I do too much traveling now. While I travel and do keynotes around the world, there are people swimming. So there's only
Oh
one
my
guy.
God.
There's one guy who overtook me, Howard Warrington, very, very good guy, and he's amazing. He's overtook me, I think, in March this year. Yeah, March this year. Um, and but then after him, there's no one vaguely close, and it's like way down. Yeah.
Wow. And you mentioned this
Mm.
time that you saw a dark, like you saw something lurking beneath the
Oh,
water. And of course, everybody thinks shark, right? Like after Jaws, everybody's scared,
yeah,
tremendously of sharks. But you saw this kind of like shade or something beneath the water,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then you saw and it wasn't a shark.
Yeah, I
Remember
know which
that
story.
post? It was a submarine.
Well, let me. Do you want me to share that story quickly? I'll make it. I'll
Yes,
make it
please.
brief. So yeah, one of the things about open water swimming is, and again, this is where we talk about the rationalization of fear. I'm fearful every time I do a swim because I'm in South African waters a lot of the time, and there are sharks and things can go wrong. So even though I've rationalized it and I know the odds are minute and all these things, when I'm swimming and I'm looking down, I get my head into a place where the fear is right at the back and I'm just getting into the flow of the swim. But that fear jumps forward, it never goes. So it's there the whole time. And I was doing this Robben Island swim, and I'd done it, as we mentioned, many, many, many times before. And generally, I take the same route. So I know exactly, you can't see the bottom when you do the Robben Island. Only like right in the beginning as you leave, because you generally swim from the island to the beach, to the mainland. And you get into deep water quite quickly. And there wasn't great visibility on this day. I was the only one in the water. So I've got a support boat alongside me, and I'm next to it, and I'm swimming along. And it was bad visibility. But as I took a breath, I saw big dark figure coming underneath me. And what that often is, when it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's generally a whale. So sometimes whales come right underneath you and they want to have a look, so they don't go very deep. And that's beautiful, but very eerie. So I immediately put my head up to the skipper who's on the boat and just said, whale, because I've got a bit of a fright. So he said, no, there's no whale. And because obviously, if you're on the boat, you can see the whale long before because it comes up. And he said, there's no whale. So I said, I promise you there's a whale. And I looked down again, and this thing was just cruising along. And suddenly it didn't look like a whale anymore. It looked like a big black pipe to me. And I know without any shadow of a doubt there's no black pipe where I was swimming, and it's very deep. And didn't think anything of it. I stuck my head up again to the skip and I said, there's something down there. I looked down again and it was gone. Anyway, I swam to the beach. No one believed my story. And I didn't tell anyone else, to be honest, until the next day. I was doing a hike with a friend and my girlfriend, and I regaled that story to them. I said, I could have sworn I saw a pipe would look like a submarine, but that's just crazy because there aren't submarines in and around these waters. And we came off the mountain and we all went home, and my friend phoned me up with a copy of the newspaper. And he was showing me a picture that there was a submarine in that bay on the day that I did the swim. So I'm still convinced it is, but apparently I can't promise that it was, because apparently the water I was in was too shallow for that kind of submarine to have been underneath me at that point. So there's a bit of dissension. But anyway, there
Wow.
was a black pipe underneath me, and there was a
You saw.
submarine in the water in the same bay on the same day, which never happens. So I'm calling it. But it was enough to freak me out.
Where were you doing the hike? Was it Lion's Head, Table Mountain?
On Table Mountain, yeah, on the back of Table Mountain.
Nice.
I do quite a lot of
Look
trail
at
running when I'm not in the.
look at that picture over there.
Oh
It's my
yeah.
daughter rappelling Table Mountain. You
Oh
can see
wow.
Lion's
I've done
Head
that.
there. Really nice.
Wow.
When we
It
went
is
there, we
beautiful.
we climbed a beautiful route called Jacob's Ladder.
Ah,
Very nice trad line.
brilliant. Wow. Okay. So
Hey,
yeah,
and
I
it's a
wasn't on ropes. I was running.
it's one of my favorite cities, and I think it's probably one of the best to live in. Cape Town. It's so beautiful, my friend. Congratulations on that. You
Oh, well,
spend
thank
much
you.
of your life in the ocean. What has the ocean taught you about your relationship with nature, and what message do you carry about its preservation?
Oh, my connection to the ocean and to the mountains and nature is quite profound. I also date a marine biologist, Lee Denecker, so I get a lot of the scientific information as well. So I'm in the water. I notice, I've been swimming now for about 25 years regularly, so I notice how things change. I notice the pollution that's come in. I notice the pollution that our oceans are really clean and beautiful for tourists. But if there's been heavy rains, all the rivers flash out into the ocean. So if you try to do a Robben Island or any crossing after heavy rains, you get a real feel of the kind of damage that we do to the environment. It just sits terribly with me. So I do a lot of talks as well when it comes to World Oceans Day, I'm not a conservationist, but I'm an oceans advocate. And we do the beach cleanups every now and then, and as depressing as that can be, because the next day all the stuff's back. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to digress. I'm
No, it's
very
good.
attached to nature. Everything that I talk about, I've made a whole career, and I've helped thousands and thousands of people purely from the lessons that the ocean has taught me, and the cold water in the ocean has taught me. I found my classroom. I don't go around the world hoping everyone's going to jump in the water and get cold. That's not my mission. I'm blessed to have learned some lessons that you can't learn anywhere else, or you're going to battle to anyway. And I've got some wonderful stories and ways to share that, which I think you've experienced at least one of them, which I hope you enjoyed.
Oh, I did very much. Talk to me about entrepreneurship. I didn't know that we were colleagues. I own an advertising agency as well.
I believe
Tell me a,
so.
a little bit about how your experience has been as an entrepreneur building
Yeah.
your
So,
business.
well, Firstly, the advertising part of my business is sadly on a bit of well, I want to say a go slow. I've handed it over to a team because my life has taken the turn into speaking, which I'm loving. But I run, which was started by my dad in many years ago, and it's a small media brokerage. So we represent different magazines and newspapers and digital channels and radio and TV. And our job is to canvas advertising. I've got a sales team, and we go out to all the ad agencies in and around South Africa, and we canvas advertising for them. So we're not involved in the creative. We sell advertising space essentially,
Nice.
and
Focus on
that
media.
has been correct. Yeah. So we media brokers essentially, advertising media brokers. And that has been amazing. I bought the business from my dad many years ago. I worked with him for 5 years, and then I bought it in 2000, so 25 years ago. And I grew it quite a lot. We had a nice team, and we were the best of the best and the top of the pops. Um, and it was great. And then, in the background, the swimming thing was happening. And slowly but surely, I can credit this to my sister who said, stop clapping so loudly for all those inspirational speakers at the conferences we were going to and get on the stage and tell your story about your swimming. And I was like, well, who wants to hear swimming stories? And I hadn't really like processed the learnings yet. I was still in the early days. And she kicked me in the pants, and my very first gig was for a sales conference, an advertising sales conference, where I'd been a delegate for many years. And my sister pushed me to be brave enough to go to the CEO of that business called Sales Guru and say, "Hey, I'm a delegate. I'm in advertising. I'm a salesman, and I also do the swimming stuff. So why don't you hire me as your next inspirational speaker?" And to my absolute horror, he hired me, and I had to come up with a story and a keynote. And I remember probably about 6 months after that, I managed to put the story together. I was pushed out on stage in front of 550 people, and I had a little mic strapped to my cheek for the first time in my life. And I got shunted out with a spotlight in my face. And I delivered a keynote, and I told my stories, same stories I'm still telling today, although I've got a lot more. And I had 550 people standing ovation after my very first talk. And that snowballed into the business I've built around that now, which is a very simple business. You can see my book behind you and the courses I do and the coaching I do. And obviously, my first love is traveling the world and doing the keynote talks that I do. A lot for entrepreneurs organization as well, which I love. I've done about, I think it's 10 to 12 chapters all
Nice.
around, and where we met on EO Academy, which was fantastic as well. So yeah, that's I'm not the world's biggest entrepreneur, but I work for myself, and I've taken swimming stories uh, to the world, and it's how I make a
And you
living,
do
how my
what you
family.
love. Yes. You
Yeah.
do what you love. Picking up on that, tell me what is success for you?
What is success? Is that the question? Yeah,
Yeah.
well, success for me is just living the lifestyle I like to live comfortably. I have no need to keep moving up hierarchical chains. I have no need to drive fancier and fancier cars. I have no need to have a big title behind my name. Those things don't interest me at all. I want my family to be comfortable. I want to be financially comfortable. That's very important to me. I don't need to be rich, and that's good. And I need health and happiness. I don't want to sound too cliched, but that's exactly what it is. I favor lifestyle over career.
Mm,
That's
I
me.
like that.
So work hard, work smart, learn, grow, push yourself, but try get yourself in a position where you can have a lifestyle as well. Where you maybe I've got so many friends who do so well and are so rich, but they can't even come for a beer, because they're working till 7, 8 at night, and then they've got an early morning, and they're on this, and they'll one day retire with many millions. I'll retire comfortably.
Very nice.
Hope. Hope. So
Have you
hire
had
me.
any have you had any heroes in your life? Are there any people you look up to?
Sure, I do. There are people that I absolutely admire. I've got to think, and it's changed not because I don't admire them anymore. It's just that I admired them maybe for the wrong reasons because I pedestaled them. As I think I told at the beginning of our conversation, where I thought these people were like gods being able to do what they do. Now, I've done 10 times more than them. Doesn't take anything away from them, but they're not role models for me anymore. They are very valuable people in my life because they gave me a taste of what I could do, even though I didn't know it back then. And that's mostly in the sporting world. And then I have great admiration for people. I barely want to say the name because it's very divisive. And people who might think I'm a nice guy or don't think I'm a nice guy anymore. But let's just forget the politics around this person. But guys like Elon Musk, I think, are so brave and so fearless and so living some of the lessons that I'm teaching that I've learned from the ocean. They take the risks. They don't fear failure. They fail and they learn from it. Like you see the kind of learnings that comes out of of that guy's failures. So yeah, to me, he's someone that I think is quite fascinating. I don't agree with everything, and I think he's a very weird character, and I certainly wouldn't want to work for him. So with those caveats, I'll peg old Elon as my as one of my role models. Well,
I
role
think
model.
it is amazing how many industries he participates in and like at the top of them. So I think that is
Yeah.
a tremendous person.
How do you do that? It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's spaceships, like brain implants, so many different things like
Yeah.
doing tunnels. Wow, amazing.
Yeah. And these were all impossible things. Well, most of them were, nearly everyone would have said it's impossible to go to Mars. It's impossible to land a rocket. It's impossible to make a profitable EV business. It's impossible to drill holes under the ground. Um, and that's what he's doing. So again, let me caveat, I don't want to be him because I don't want to work as hard as him. I don't think he has a lifestyle. Um, but that's probably a fascination. That's a good word.
For sure.
Fascinated.
What is something that you would like your kid to learn from you?
To not fear failure, to get outside the comfort zone. And as boring as that sounds, as we discussed earlier, that's a lot harder. I don't push him in any way to do anything that he doesn't want to do, but I am working hard to show him the benefits of taking a chance, going a direction that he probably didn't think he would be able to go, not fearing embarrassment. I would like things that I didn't have growing up was a great level of confidence. And I think any kid to have a level of confidence that I didn't have would set them on a much better trajectory than I've been blessed to have.
We're nearing the end of the podcast, and I'm so happy about the content that we have shared, and thank you so much for bringing it. Um, One of the questions that I want to ask you is you have coached a lot of people, you have coached entrepreneurs, you have coached CEOs of big companies, you have been at their leadership events. Have you seen constants or things that you recognize at different events or with different coachings of these CEOs, and that it has been
Yeah.
like a good takeaway that you can share with us?
I think so. I'm trying to think to refine it all into a takeaway. So, slightly lateral answer is that from school children to top level C level from massive corporations that I work with, all relate to exactly the same messages and mental epiphanies that I put on the table for them in my creative way. They all relate to it exactly the same on their different within their different realities. Does that make sense? So a
Yeah.
school kid will be thinking about exams and the pressures that they have. A CEO will be thinking about their corporation and the decisions that they're making and why they're perhaps making those decisions that they are. So the common thread through everybody is the eye-opening realization that you need to understand how powerful the mind is to work against you. Not one person you ever ask, if you say, do you think the human mind is powerful? Everyone's going to say, of course, we knew that, from kid. But very, very few people say, yeah, my powerhouse of a mind is just working against me. And even though that's quite an easy realization, you can say, okay, well, Ryan says it is, to understand how it is and to understand when it's doing it. Because as you put earlier, your mind is you and you are your mind. It's not something that sits over there that you can fine tune. It's like your feelings are your feelings. Your defense mechanisms are your defense mechanisms. And just once we deliver those messages, and once I start a journey to try and find that switch I spoke about that takes you out of that self-protect way of looking at your problems, at your challenges, at red tape, at mountains in your life, and puts it into more of a self-explore mindset, that's a takeaway that I think is very valuable to most.
Nice. That's awesome. When you were mentioning about the speaking in public speaking, I think, what they say that people are more afraid of public speaking than of dying. And it's funny because recently we were at the GLC, a Global Leadership Conference. We had one in Cape Town a couple years ago, and this year
Yeah.
it was in Hawaii. And I was able to address all the member leaders who are 1,700 were there. And I was really stressed about doing it. I had never had, this amount of people listen to a message that I would deliver. I
Yeah.
had help from a fellow from South Africa. You might know him, Rich Mulholland, and his
Oh, no,
team
Rich, very well. Yeah,
are
good friends.
tremendous. They helped me a lot with the slides and everything and how to present it. But it's that imaginary fear, like they tell you, it'll suck. Nobody will want to listen to you. What message are you going to give these tremendous entrepreneurs? And your mind is racing
Yeah.
with it. The night before the event, I took like 7 slides out because I was not matching the times that I had. And in the
Yeah.
end, it was really good. I gave one message that I think it resonates with you, and I had shared it with you at one point. Sorry to get out of the camera, making a mess over here, but this one right here about
Do
doing
hard
hard
things.
things.
There you go.
Uh,
That says it all. Yeah.
because
Do hard things.
and I feel that in life I have been about 3 times very close to dying. One time, 2 times I broke my neck. One time in three
Oh,
pieces, the C1. Yeah. One time I got attacked by bees, which I shared at the event, over 400 bee stings. And after
wow.
those failures, after being almost dead, the thing that happens afterwards, the thing that happens where you go like, oh my God, like this existential crisis maybe of what's the whole idea behind life, and what are we here for, and how can we make the most of it. I'm curious if after what happened to you doing that crossing where you were very close to dying, did that happen? I mean, because you had this realization from when you were in your 30s as a couch potato, as you said, to being able to do these great things. But in the meantime, those very hard moments in life where you're almost, kick the boot, did that catapulted you to something else?
It did. Um, it did in a big way, but I'm embarrassed to say it took me 3 years to get there. Because on that particular, what I termed a failure, even though, I didn't box it as a failure for myself at the time. I did what egotistical, embarrassed people do when they fail is I shoved it under the carpet, and instead of unpacking it and figuring out, did I play a role? I blamed everything around it and I set a bigger goal and I carried on. And trying to reach that bigger goal was severely impacted by my mismanagement of the failure in the North Channel. And that's a keynote that I give. I either call it failing forward or I call it beyond the summit. It's also quite a fascinating story, and it ends in a in a wonderful video as well.
Nice. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I see myself hopefully with lots and lots of speaking gigs around the world. which is pretty much where I find myself now, but I need lots and lots more to grow my business and make it a more sustainable. So that's my pure focus, is to do that. I also have some big challenges that I want to in the next year to start training for. So Ryan might be 52 years old, but I'm still wanting to push my boundaries, and I still want to set a goal that I don't think I can achieve, because then I will grow some more. So I want to keep growing. In 5 years, I want to be saying I want to keep growing, but uh, I want to be out there on stages. I really do.
Nice. 52 years young, my friend. Thank you
That's
so
it.
much. Thank you so much for sharing
Wonderful.
your experience with everyone. Um, your remarkable journey with us. What strikes me is that your message isn't just about swimming in icy waters or breaking world records. It's about showing us that our limits are often self imposed, that interference holds us back more than we realize, and that at some point we'll have to jump in. Your push past impossible philosophy is one we can take into our businesses, our personal challenges, and our daily lives as well. And for our listeners, take a moment today to ask yourself, what's the impossible you have been avoiding? And what would it mean to step forward anyway? Ryan, it has been an honor to have you. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all the listeners as well. I hope you enjoyed.
All right, my friends, remember, you thought about someone, send this podcast to them. They need to listen to it. We need to spread the word so that we can continue sharing great messages of successful people, people who are disruptive and who do amazing things like Ryan. Thank you very much, and see you till next one.